Commodore Uday Bhaskar is with me in the studio. You heard that interview. That's incidentally the second interview of the Army Chief right here to NDTV. Couple of important things that he has mentioned on the issue of the CDS. He says, as the cabinet note clearly states, the three chiefs will continue to report to the Raksha Mantri, so I don't think that will undergo any change. On integrated battle groups, he says the organizations we currently have date back to several years, even back to the First World War. The division was considered the smallest unit to be able to carry out an independent task, but many things have changed since then. He has laid a lot of stress on modernization. He spoke yesterday about the challenges on the northern border. I want to understand from you that for an army chief in these interesting times, do you think that his priorities are well in place? And can he decide his priorities on his own?
I would say, as the army chief, he is well within his, I would say, operational rights to define how the army would function, how the army would train and be ready for any exigency. And I think if you heard the choice of word and phrase, I said this yesterday and I'm repeating it, that General Narwane is very measured in what he's saying.
Correct.
And he's also very correct, if I could use that word in the current context, where I think he's drawing attention to certain very well laid down principles. And one of them, I think he's reminding all of us that, contrary to some speculation about the role of the CDS, that the cabinet note is very clear that the three service chiefs will continue to exercise their own operational command and control. They are the C&Cs effectively of the three services. And the role of the CDS is to coordinate within the context of the COSC, which is the Chiefs of Staff Committee. And the CDS himself is the principal advisor to the Raksha Mantri, but he is not the only advisor or the single point advisor. And on matters military, the three chiefs would have the same rights that they had in the past of being able to access or convey their point of view to the RM. I think he's underlined that. It's again by the book. And the other interesting point, of course, that he made is that the way in which he looks at the future of the funding for the Indian military across the board.
Correct.
Now, he referred to the $5 trillion,
correct,
holy grail.
Which is a very political, in these times when we are talking about army being apolitical, well, I don't blame him, because he's just making a statement.
Yeah, that's, I think, a fairly motherhood apple pie that every Indian, I'm sure, would like India to become a $5 trillion.
Absolutely.
And what his point was that let's look at the country's overall growth so that we get a higher quantum when you look at the defense budget. But I have a slightly different take on that. And I think this is as true for General Rawat as it will be for General Narwane, that if India is to review its current composite military capability, I keep repeating this, we need to look at composite capability that will go beyond the Army, Navy, Air Force and subsume or take on board cyber, space and spectrum. That is your new global common. It's the new technological common. And to be able to acquire those capabilities, Sanket, my limited point is that we need, first of all, the intellectual rigor and the political determination to understand how we will deal with China. Because the interesting part is that China is looking at this problem in much the same way in relation to the United States of America. They are not seeking equivalence. I'll give you a simple example.
But they don't share a border.
But yet they want to establish their ability to engage in compellence. My own assessment as an analyst is it's very unlikely that the United States and China will go to war. It's very unlikely that India and China would go to war in the conventional World War II sense or even in the 1962 sense. But yet, both these Asian countries are investing in their militaries. Either they know it very astutely or they are doing it by osmosis, which is that they've inherited certain, shall we say, characteristics, whereby they want a military capability that would allow them to deal with their adversary, competitor, whatever. I mean, US, China is a good example.
Correct.
The United States has 11 carrier battle groups. I don't think China would match it carrier group for carrier group, but they'll acquire the ability to disrupt the carrier groups of the United States in waters that they deem critical. No, in say Pacific, etc.
No, I'm saying in the Indian context, if you were to
extrapolate, I'd say we need something similar. That when we deal with China, now again, General Narwane spoke about the current protocol, that if there is any kind of a standoff, it will be dealt with by the
local level.
Local commanders.
Pinpricks and skirmishes were the words he used.
But in the event it goes beyond that, what does India do? India as the country. So this is where I'm saying that we need to invest in trans-border military capability, which goes beyond the mountain core.
Okay.
And have this competence and the intellectual rigor to think through that our limited money, can it go into cyberspace and spectrum?
Interesting.
And then be able to deal with our threat, or yesterday we said between Chunauti and Khatra, challenge and threat. How do we keep it at the median of a challenge and manage it most effectively?
Okay. Thank you so much, Commodore Uday Bhaskar, for explaining this. I'm sure the new Army Chief also must be thinking about these things. Thank you so much for joining us.